Yeah, hold on. I'm like
Yep.
getting there, guys. So make host. Hey, can can I make you a I can make you a host.
You can make me co-host.
Change role to attendee, forbid record, put on hold. Can remove you. Let me see if I can get it here. I'm not going to do all these things. Tell you what, I'll let you drive.
All right.
I turned 40 and all of a sudden technology is beyond my grasp. It's like I didn't go get my daughter in here to help me like work this thing.
You're a baby.
Dude.
Awesome. So it's 5:05. I think we can go ahead and get started. First of all, I want to thank my panelists for offering their time and being willing to speak to the students. This is really a great opportunity for them to understand and get more insight in what you guys see the future being as we're in this different environment. And also, I also want to thank the students who joined and who've set apart time of their summer to kind of attend this session. I think you'll get great value out of it. And I hope you feel confident enough to just pop in and ask questions as desired and as wanted. So to start off, there we go. Awesome. So first of all, a brief agenda. We'll introduce the panelists. We'll introduce who we are, the Atlanta Economics Club. Then the panelists will go ahead and give their take on the current labor environment and how that pertains to us students. And then they'll also give some insight on which skills they believe are most valuable going forward. Then they'll talk about a bit about the virtual structure, how they've been organizing themselves, and the best practices. And then at the end, we'll have some scholarship information, so I do suggest you stick to the end as well. So to start off, this is the board. Some of the members aren't able to attend today, and they're very sorry about that. But most of our board is here, and they're very happy and delighted, and I would love for them to go ahead and introduce themselves briefly before we jump on. And why don't we start with Abraham?
So my name is Ibrahim Bayan. I'm the vice president here at the Atlanta Economics Club. I work as the industrial economist over at CBRE here in Atlanta. I've been a business economist since the end of the Great Recession, around the end of 2009. I joined with UPS, helping them do economic analysis and forecasting for about 8 years. I left UPS in 2018, and I joined a startup company called FreightWaves. FreightWaves essentially looks at like real-time data of trucking and freight conditions in the U.S. economy. Left there at the beginning of this year and joined CBRE, where I look at industrial trends in industrial commercial real estate, so warehouses and manufacturing, rent and demand trends for that kind of real estate space.
Awesome, thanks. Mike, you want to go ahead?
Yep, I'm Mike Scordelis. I am the head of U.S. macro strategy at SunTrust Bank, which is now Truist, and I look at the economy a 30,000-foot view. Although I am in banking, I don't focus primarily on banking. I focus on the overall economy and how it impacts certainly markets, among other things. And as far as time in the industry, as you can see from my gray beard, over 25 years with a variety of different firms, banks, and what have you around the country. So that's one of the things, is the have gun will travel, at least from my experience.
Awesome, awesome. Jonathan.
I'm Jonathan Smoke. I'm the treasurer for the Atlanta Economics Club, and I'm chief economist at Cox Automotive. Basically, I guess if I was trying to see how many years I've been a business economist, it's probably been 16 now. And I've worked in construction, real estate, and automotive since the time I've been at Cox, which has been about 3.5 years. But before that, I've been a management consultant and worked in corporate strategy as well. And like Mike, I've been in multiple organizations of just about every size and type. If you don't know who Cox Automotive is, we're headquartered here in Atlanta. We're a part of Cox Enterprises. We own consumer-facing websites like Auto Trader and Kelley Blue Book, and we run Mannheim Auto Auctions, which is the largest wholesaler of used vehicles in the United States, and multiple software products that are used behind the scenes by principally dealers that operate not just in the United States, but also in several other countries.
Perfect. Brian.
Hi. Thank you, everyone, for joining on today's call. My name is Brian Robertson. I am the Quantitative Financial Markets Advisor at the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta is the 6th district in the Federal Reserve System. We are the nation's central bank, and so we are charged with maintaining the payment system. So those long numbers at the bottoms of all your checks, that all gets routed through us, actually literally us, specifically the Atlanta Fed. Maintain the soundness and safety of the financial system through our banking regulators, which my colleague Mike down the bottom of my screen there probably has some familiarity with. But then also we conduct a wide variety of economic and financial market research, both locally within our district and within the state of Georgia, but also nationally and internationally. We don't really have a boundary in terms of where our interests lie. Some of that is to further the development of economics as both a profession and as a sort of a human pursuit, but also more specifically for our bank president, Raphael Bostic, and his responsibilities with the FOMC. So we do our best to arm him with the best intelligence and data and analysis that we could possibly give him to help him make the best decisions when he goes up to DC 8 times a year. Hopefully only 8 times a year. Occasionally there's some emergency meetings that we've most recently had, but hopefully only 8 times a year. And we're really glad to have everybody on the call. We are the AEC in my capacity here. I'm the director of marketing. And so, we've been around since 1972. A big component of what we do as an organization is reaching out to students and deepening the bench for economic and finance and sort of business economics professionals. So we're really excited to have everyone here.
Awesome. Great. And Antonio.
Hi, thank you for joining the call. So I'm the past president of the Atlantic Economic Club. I've been with the club probably the longest of all the members on the call right now. But I've never been an actual staff economist. I use my applied economics degree to actually do market research and marketing analytics. So for the past four or 5 years, I've been with a company called Sapient. It's called Publicis Sapient now, and it's a digital marketing consultancy that's under the Publicis Group umbrella nationwide or internationally, actually. And my role specifically is doing marketing analytics, specifically around digital analytics for my clients, such as Mercedes-Benz, Truist, as a client of mine as well, and a lot of big financial services companies. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. And we have a guest today. Her name is Mary Cassis. I'll have her introduce herself. Please, Mary, take it away.
Hi, I'm Mary Cassis. I am a professor of economics at the University of West Georgia. I think I might have Antonio beat in being the member of the club the longest. I've been a member since the early 90s when I was a graduate student at Georgia State. And I've been at the University of West Georgia since 2002. And prior to that, I worked as an economist at the Economic Forecasting Center at Georgia State while I was in grad school and for a few years after I graduated. As far as the club is concerned, I am the chair of the scholarship committee, which we will talk some more about the scholarship at the end of this call.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for introducing yourself. My name is Jael Ortiz, and I'll be moderating this panel. I am the student liaison, and I'm currently studying at Georgia State University. So with that, I think we're good to go. We're good to start. So a bit of a background of the club. It has been around in Atlanta for around 45 years. And its main goal and purpose is to connect private business enterprises with federal and state or local business activity and related academia. How does that relate to you students? Well, the club is greatly interested in funneling the pipeline of future economists, which is one of the reasons why there's a scholarship and why we like having events like this, simply to open up and broaden the availability of information towards business economics for students like you. So we're very excited to be hosting this event today, and we look forward to hosting future events like this. With that, so to all my economists, I'm sure this question comes up all the time. So what are you seeing? What's going on? How does that relate to students at the moment? And anybody can jump in and just answer however you prefer.
Well, clearly we're going through a recession that is unlike any recession that any of us living have ever gone through. Many of us were acting economists back when we had the Great Recession, and we all thought that we would never see anything quite like that again in our lifetimes. This one, of course, is unique because it's really driven by the pandemic and the health crisis related to it. And therefore, some of the traditional ways of gauging exactly how the economy is going to recover and when we get back to normal are all predicated by what the virus itself actually does and how we're able to combat it. And so I like to say that we're essentially in the middle stages now. I use music quite often to describe it, and this is the Taylor Swift Cruel Summer phase that we're in. So we've kind of gone through the initial pandemic and lockdown phase. We've had a strong rebound in many parts of the economy since then, especially May, June, and into July. Since I cover automotive, automotive has been impressive in its recovery. Probably only housing has been, more strong and has the ability to recover. But other parts of the economy just can't fully recover. If you think about, for example, travel, or you think about places that are highly dependent upon services and travel. For example, Orlando and Las Vegas are two places that immediately come to mind as impossible to fully recover until we have much lower risk of spread of COVID-19. And so as a result, I think we're all trying to assess what it's going to take to keep the rest of the economy performing well, and how long is that likely to be. From a business, we've all had to respond to the situation. The pandemic was officially became a pandemic, I believe, on March 13th. On March 11th, Cox Automotive and I think many of us on the panel, it was all about the same day. I remember it vividly. About noon on Wednesday, we made the announcement, everybody go home. And that was the same day that the NBA stopped its game and the MLS and NBA and everyone else suspended their seasons. It was, quite a dramatic event. The good news is many of us who are, professionals doing work like we do, we can work from home. So a lot of what we've been doing is trying to figure out how to be more effective. And that has meant investing in tools like Zoom, spending our days in video conferences like this rather than doing things in person. And I've traveled my entire career because I've been in real estate and automotive, and that means going to clients, whether they're auto manufacturers or dealers or banks or all of the kind of companies involved. And usually that means a lot of in-person meetings. So I've had to adjust to a lot of, I actually can have more meetings, and we've called it Zoom fatigue, because you essentially are calibrating to working nearly 24/7. So all of us are trying to learn how to keep from burning out, to get recharged, and kind of adjust from that perspective. And, we've more or less given guidance to our employees that it's not likely to be back to the office until sometime next year. And so we're all kind of responding to that. But meanwhile, being an economist could not have a higher value than right now, because it seems like everybody wants to talk to us about what's happening, make sense about how and plan for the future. And even though it's worse than predicting the weather right now, you know, we all are certainly trying to help our organizations and those of us who serve clients, you know, likewise help clients make decisions. So I think it's one where there's lots of opportunities. Clearly, businesses, if you've just graduated, this is probably one of the worst times ever to be trying to move into a solid full-time position. But for those of you who are students, I have a strong belief that by the time you're graduating, whether that's next spring or sometime thereafter, we are going to be in a much better place than we are now, with more certainty. And I think a lot of what we've been doing with using high frequency data and a lot of those kinds of things, you're going to be more equipped and will be valuable additions to our team. So I think the opportunities are huge. People are much more focused on making good decisions, and I think that those of you who are interested in this as a profession, it is definitely a profession that will continue to get stronger and stronger.
Awesome. Awesome. And I think you touched up on so many great things, working from home, balancing everything, getting used to a new environment, that will definitely dig deeper. So we have actually some questions already popping up. So this is from Sam. What correlations did you initially expect to see following the onset of COVID-19 that didn't end up playing out how you or others may have predicted?
Well, I'll start this and then let several others add to it. But the traditional macro models, the basics of econometrics, had to sort of be thrown out because you know, the levels of unemployment, how quickly that happened, the relationship to consumer spending, a lot of things are clearly very different this time. And so I'll give you an example in the automotive market. Usually, yes, vehicle sales are highly sensitive to the economy. And when the economy is going into a recession, we sell fewer new vehicles. But actually, typically in a recession, we can continue to sell used vehicles. And in fact, sometimes used vehicle sales are higher during a recession because people are, for example, overextended on a new vehicle, they become unemployed, that vehicle gets repossessed, but you still need transportation to be able to find another job or to take care of your family or whatever that might be. So you usually see very little declines in used vehicle sales, and we had 80% declines in used vehicle sales, you know, in the last couple of weeks of March. So there's been a lot of things that traditionally have to be, if you're looking at straight correlations, they're not going to equate because there's no time in history that we've had a comparable experience in terms of the factors impacting the marketplace. What we've done to contend with that is to really focus on high frequency data that helps us connect the dots with what's happening from shopping to credit applications to who's purchasing what to what the supply looks like. And the supply side has been another crazy part of this because there's never been a recession in history where every factory in the world that provides vehicles to the United States was shut down for months. And that's been the condition. And ironically, right now, this is not a great time to be buying a vehicle if you want any advice on that, because there's so few both new and used vehicles available that you're not going to be getting a great deal, and you might not even find the exact vehicle you want until we see factories come back to normal. So I think we're all having to be creative and find the variables and find the things that make sense, and you can't just rely on a traditional regression model to tell you what vehicle sales, for example, are going to look like when unemployment is 11.1%.
So I think,
Oh, go ahead.
I agree with that.
I'll take it. No, so, got three people talking. I'm gonna bully my answer in here. Sorry, guys. So part of my role at the Atlanta Fed is paying close attention to financial market data. As by way of background, an extended introduction, I got my BBA in finance from Kennesaw State University, my MBA in finance from Georgia Tech, and also my master's in quantitative finance, also from Georgia Tech. So I'm very much a financial markets guy. On March 3rd, as the market was expressing concerns about how this virus is going to affect us economically, I believe it was the 3rd. It was a Sunday night emergency meeting. The FOMC convened and lowered interest rates down to, I believe, about 100 basis points. At the time, it was trading between 150 to 175 basis points. I may be off by a few, but it doesn't really matter because a week later, they went to 0. And traditionally, when we think of how monetary policy gets executed, it's through something called the Fed funds rate. And typically, it trades in the middle of what we call the target range. So they all get together and say, well, we want to trade in a 25 basis point range, so 0.25% range. We'd like for it to trade somewhere in the middle. So half of 25 is 12.5 basis points. We dropped interest rates or the target range to 0 to 25. So that should trade around 12.5 basis points. Well, it didn't. It traded around 3 basis points. It traded very close to the 0 lower bound, so close to 0 lower bound that many are going to make the argument that it is effectively at 0. That is not a problem. Where the problem arises is that we use financial market data to make inferences about in what direction do experts see the economy moving. Because if you recall, if you've taken a finance class or even an intermediate economics class, financial markets are forward-looking, right? So they incorporate some expectation about what the future is going to look like. And people risk a lot of money on what they feel those expectations are, right? And so if you think about what are ways you can infer about the future, one is surveys, right? You can ask somebody, what do you think is going to happen tomorrow? Or, which I may be biased, but think is a better way of doing it, you can ask somebody, put your own money down on what your opinion is about the future. And so I can have a whole range of opinions about the world, but when I got to put my money on it, I get real honest about my opinions real quick. They tend to moderate very, very fast. So financial markets are very important for us as an institution, and just from surveillance. Well, interest rates move so low that we lost that ability to really get a good sense of where the market expects things to go. And things like institutional details about how firms trade in these markets, institutional details about what are the exchange's minimum allowable changes in price quotes, right? So when we think of prices, we think of them in a continual basis, right? So it can be anywhere from, a penny to sky's the limit. The way exchanges work is that they say, okay, that's great, but we need to make this functional for our traders. And so we'll only allow these instruments to move in certain predetermined increments, right? And further, we'll only allow certain types of instruments to trade at any one point in time just to keep things orderly. Otherwise, it's chaos. It's complete pandemonium. So those are sort of the two fundamental aspects of financial markets. And that's why places like the New York Stock Exchange or the Chicago Mercantile Exchange are the most heavily traded exchanges on the planet. Interest rates have moved inside of what those boundaries are. So the interest rates are actually trading inside of the minimum allowable distance that a price can move, which is to say, if interest rates move up and down a basis point on any given day, or the market expects interest rates to move a few basis points here or there in the future, that's beyond the ability of the market to resolve that difference from a movement up or a movement down. And that creates a significant problem. It's a very nerdy thing, right? It's a very kind of like wonky thing. It's sort of like reading a legal document and looking for the little semicolon that makes something go your way versus some other's way. But as it turns out, it's a very important impact. And so you may be hearing things about oh, well, the market's saying that rates could go negative and this and that, and making all kinds of forecasts about what we're going to do as an institution based off what they're seeing in the market. And as it turns out, where things currently are, we're just not really able to get that kind of resolution. So that's been the biggest challenge for us.
I know some other people wanted to jump in. Is there maybe one more panelist who want to give their opinion on that? We can move on.
Sure. So what I was going to say is, like, when thinking about the pandemic, I think what caught us the most off guard was just the way it was all going to unfold here in the U.S. You know, I think back, we were doing presentations on the coronavirus at the end of February as to like what we thought it was going to do to the overall economy. I mean, and at the time, the general perception of it was that this was like a Chinese supply chain kind of problem, right? That it was a problem that was affecting the Chinese economy, and so it had these kind of spillover effects into the U.S. because it was going to disrupt manufacturers. And from there, from you know, by the time you get to mid-March, you're already saying, okay, well, you know, now what does it look like now that this becomes like a U.S. domestic, let's shut down the economy problem? And now the issue that we have is exactly what the rebound from the coronavirus is looking like. You know, I don't know how the rest of the panelists kind of how they address it in their firms, but what we did was we looked around the rest of the world. Like we looked at the experience in Europe, the experience in China, and how their economies kind of rebounded when dealing with the pandemic. And we said, well, you know, they saw these kind of sharp V-shaped recoveries, so we expect that same sort of thing here in the U.S. When things sort of open back up. And I think initially that was kind of the case. Like you get some opening up in May and June of a lot of these states, and some of that activity came back really quickly. But then, you know, at some point, I think we all realized that like the U.S. experience is going to be distinctly different than the rest of the world. That sort of looking at how Europe's responded and how China's responded isn't necessarily the way the U.S. is going to play out in the U.S. Just because we haven't done the same sort of thing to keep cases under control or to contain the virus the same way that other countries have. And so that's been sort of the big surprise on our end. Just the evolution of it, it's been like a steady stream of downward revisions to where we think, you know, how we think the economy is going to respond to it, from, you know, initial small impacts from supply chain disruptions to big impacts, the sharp rebounds, to now this kind of like big impact with looks like a more sluggish kind of path back to normal, or anything that resembles normal. And so it's been a steady kind of adjustment along the way, and I'm sure there's more to come as we kind of wade our way through this. But Jonathan is absolutely right. Like at some point you just kind of look at it and say, well, you know, all the models that you have that sort of explain the way the economy ties to your own business performance, at some point they lose their value because they don't tie to anything in history, and you just sort of stop, and you just at that point you're just looking at any kind of real-time information you can. Our company covers commercial real estate, so we're looking at like hotel data, foot traffic in the retail stores, restaurant data. Like those kind of real-time indicators have proven to be a lot more valuable than any kind of model that we might have already had has been.
Okay, great. Now we did receive some other questions from our audience, and we'll have to kind of shift gears a bit here. This is more on the diversity portion of the field. So for women in the field and for people of color in the field, what has been your strategy to continue advancing in your career and succeed?
So, I mean, my advice would be to try and find the mentors, establish like a good support system in whatever company you find yourself in. Also understanding just like the culture that you're walking into. Not every corporation is the same. Some corporations put more emphasis on diversity than others, and so, you know, before you kind of plan out what your path to success is going to look like, you kind of need to understand exactly the way things work there. And so that it takes a little bit of time to sort of understand, you know, how much emphasis the company itself puts on it. You can always, I mean, in the interviewing process, you can always ask about these kind of things, but the idea that you're going to get like 100% honest answer, I don't think is all that realistic. You know, you can, but I think it's definitely important to just kind of understand it. And then once you're in there and you're kind of established in your job, you know, try to find a support system to help you along the way. Find mentors that have kind of been through the same sort of path. Identify people that are sort of at your end goal. So wherever you see yourself, wherever you'd like your career to go, find people that are already there and see if you can figure out exactly what it is that they did to get there. But there's no real cookie cutter kind of answer, because every corporation really is different. Like the different corporations I've been in, they've all had different attitudes towards diversity. From, you know, some companies are just kind of like, the best person's going to get the job regardless, and they kind of they don't put any emphasis on establishing diversity, whereas others have a very concerted effort to promote minorities and to give opportunities to minorities and women. And so you really kind of have to understand that part of it first.
Now, Mary, I apologize.
I could jump in on this as well.
Yes, sir.
So in my experience, the two movements, the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement that has just taken place, have really changed the paradigm for a lot of companies. I've been in corporate America, you know, for 25, 30 years. So I've never seen the intentionality of companies today trying to go after diverse talent right now. So I think if you're a person of color, a woman, a minority, that culture is really important. This is a great time to really get out there and show what you got, because right now companies are intentionally looking for diverse talent in this new environment. So I actually feel the pull of it, and I hope other people also feel the pull of the demand pull. I'm speaking of corporations intentionally trying to go out and look for talent right now. But it definitely depends on the company and the culture.
Mary, if I may get your take on that from the women's side as well, that'd be great.
You know, I agree with the previous comments. I think that I've been in the field for a while now, and it's definitely changing. There's more women now in the field than there used to be. There's more minorities, even though we're still all a minority in the field. There's been a lot of growth in that area, and I think companies and universities, in terms of hiring faculty, are looking for more diversity. And one comment I'll make on mentors is I think it's definitely important for women to seek female mentors, but I don't think you should limit yourself to that. That you, again, should look for that person who's where you want to be, and try to, you know, build a mentor-mentee relationship with as many people who are in that position as you can, because I think it will benefit you.
Awesome, thank you. So we'll continue to answer questions alongside and along the way. Awesome. So now going into having the context of where we are in the labor market and the economy and our diversity efforts, what are some technical skills that you strongly recommend students to start gaining, especially now?
I would say software skills, specifically around programming, Python, SQL, R. In the environment that I work in, it's all about big data. So being able to wrangle that data together and be able to tell those stories are huge advantages.
Yeah, you know, I think for students right now, if you're not at a level of technical mastery in Excel, the very least in Excel, that should be your highest priority. If you don't learn, you know, how to program in a more formal sense, or, you know, if you're familiar with some basic statistical software like R or MATLAB or SAS or any of the other platforms, learning Excel is ultimately going to be your meal ticket. It's the de facto application for every finance and economics department in the planet. Everyone uses it. Everyone knows how, you know, knows what it looks like. And if you can make that thing look pretty and do things that are unexpected, you'll be all that much more valuable. That's kind of the you know, when I was a financial analyst, that was a joke that we were the company's second IT department, because every kind of small technical question that came up about whether it's Excel or, you know, something to do with software, like it was, you know, it usually came to us first. So, and there's a number of resources you can do to get that. I mean, YouTube obviously is big, but there are a number of resources. I think through Wall Street Oasis, I think is the name of the company. They do regular Excel training to get that kind of, you know, level of mastery that you would you know, you would expect to see from a more seasoned analyst starting out in the industry.
Right. There's also Udemy courses, Coursera courses. I know some of my peers have as a goal to not use a mouse, to fully operate in Excel without a mouse. So that's funny that you mentioned that.
Yeah, you go into actually, if you were to tour any of the investment banking floors, all the analysts have ripped off, I think it's the F2 key on all their keyboard, maybe it's the F1 key on all their keyboards, just so they don't hit anything accidentally. Like they just limited, you know, they've destroyed their keyboards just to make sure they don't hit the wrong button. It's hilarious.
Absolutely.
And I definitely want to emphasize the communication piece of it, because so Jonathan does a great job of, you have a person that can actually do a lot of analysis and can understand the data, but then communicating that out to a broader audience, that's the key. If you can master both of those things, your goal. And Jonathan does a really good way of doing it.
Thank you, Antonio.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I would say the buzzword for that these days is storytelling. It's one thing to be able to crunch the numbers, but it's another thing to actually help people understand what it is you're trying to explain, and what's the takeaway for them. And so I would absolutely agree, communication. And as I mentioned earlier, as we've moved to having to work with higher frequency data, there is no question that heavy ability to use statistical software or use data science tools, and just having a mindset of managing disparate, never perfect, very dirty data coming from all kinds of sources and being able to make something out of it is fundamentally probably the most important skill for helping us produce insights, because that's basically what I feel like my job is, producing insights and explaining them.
There we go. I feel like you guys made my job 10 times easier by giving me a segue to the next section, which is soft skills, which you already, you know, dive in, you know. So communication skills is a big one. Having the ability of seeing data, understanding data, and then putting a story behind it is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so there's a number of pieces there. One of the biggest soft skills I think that is I've seen throughout my career, not just with myself, but also with others and others that have done very well and excelled in a number of different disciplines within finance and economics, is flexibility. And as silly as that sounds, basically always be flexible is something that has been drummed into my head as I've gone through nearly 30 years in the industry, which is there's always going to be things that aren't perfect, to Jonathan's point, and you have to be understanding that things are not always going to be perfect, and you can't wait until all the data comes in. And in many things, even to the current period, we didn't have all the data, but we knew things were deteriorating really very fastly. And so like in our case, Truist, we made the call and saying it was a recession well ahead of when everybody else was, because we saw all the data deteriorating and we didn't wait until the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported monthly job numbers, or it was the National Bureau of Economic Research, which officially tells us it's a recession. They didn't tell us that until 3 months after it started. Well, we can't wait until all the data is perfect. So that being flexible is an important thing. And then the last thing I would point out is the just intellectual curiosity, which also hits one of the earlier questions about what are the skills that students can have an edge. It's intellectual curiosity. And there's an old saying basically that you never stop learning. That's an absolutely enormous thing, is we never stop learning. So all of us got our advanced degrees and what have you, years ago, decades ago, but we're still learning. Mary has a PhD. She could tell you probably more than anybody, but we're always learning.
Amen, brother. I would take somebody on my team that showed intellectual curiosity and a passion for just wanting to understand how things work, how the economy works, over any other skill, because we can teach just about any other skill. And if you don't have that passion and the interest in understanding things, it's just a day job. And I don't think any of us on this panel are the type of people that check in at 9 and clock out at 5.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Especially now that we're all virtual, we're kind of always at the office, right? It's this weird state where like you're never at the office, but you're always at the office, and the lines have just gotten completely blurred, and where our professional and personal lives begin and end. I think for a lot of this, and I'm going to reflect on all of my failures right now. As students kind of entering the workforce, now is awkward of a workforce, because it's not like any of us on the call have a lot of experience working virtually like we are right now. This is all new for us, and in a sense, we're kind of making it up as we go along and just trying to feel our way through the dark. And also allow me to just speak in complete idioms for the next 30 seconds. So the two things is that, to keep in mind, is that praise is given in spoonfuls and taken away in buckets, right? So you get a couple of good wins underneath your belt, you get a little cocky, you bite off more than you can chew, and you make a mistake. And when you make mistakes, they are glaring. Everybody sees. They may not let you know it's a mistake. They may not let you know it's there, but they notice it. And that's really something that's going to hurt you, especially early on in your career. Is getting those things wrong, which leads me to my kind of second idiom, is manage expectations. Really honestly manage expectations. I mean, if when you get out there, I remember when I was out there, I didn't even know how to pick up a phone and transfer it to another, like they just don't teach you how to work in school. If you give someone the impression like you can be trusted with something, and then you sort of fumble around with it and really kind of fall short of this expectation you set, that's going to leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth. And that's something that's going to be remembered for a very long time. Like I said, it's taken away in buckets. And so I think managing those expectations and, kind of being honest with your abilities and trying to, get a sense of what the standards are, what's expected of you, and making sure you hit those goals is arguably the most important thing above anything kind of strategic or whatever. Because, at the end of the day, like, you should be living in a virtual state of discomfort for your entire career. Like, you should be uncomfortable always. There's never a point where you should feel like, I've got this. No, like you should never feel that way. The second you feel that way is usually the moment right before you make a big glaring mistake that could potentially be career ending.
And the economy is going to humble you anyway.
Yeah, so, yeah. And then when you get out of the market, it will reveal itself to you in due time. So, this is sort of a difficult thing to learn because there is no playbook behind this, but, knowing when and how much to bite off and how big that is and how far you're stretching yourself, is a task that you kind of need to sort of feel out on your own. And I wish that there was a hard and fast rule behind it, other than set expectations low going in and let your manager sort of tell you, hey guy, you're lowballing yourself. I need you up here a little bit higher. Can you operate up here? And of course you can. But don't be afraid to take those risks. You know, you'll get a sense of where the sort of low hanging fruit is that you can pick every once in a while. And over time, you're just going to build this sort of reputation as being a real star player. And that's really kind of those are the real soft skills I see that people make the most, especially early in their career.
Oh, that's perfect. I see our chat very interesting. Some students have even included links to resources for Python and Excel. I love that. So if you're a student who's looking to build those technical hard skills, Serena has been gracious enough to find a link and just put it there for us. So feel free to dig in. I do want to address a question that came in a while ago, back through, it's going to take us back to the diversity issue, but I think it should be addressed. And this question is coming from Maya. Do you think that diversity and inclusion efforts can genuinely be successful without introducing equity? Or is equity an automatic assumption when speaking of diversity and inclusion?
That is a great question. And we've seen in research numbers, obviously, that when you look at, for the same position, the hierarchy of pay, you know, you sort of have, you know, the white man, then Asian man, and then black man, and then it goes to the women, right? And then usually black women are the lowest paid person on the hierarchy list when it comes to equity. So great question. Yeah, diversity and inclusion does not automatically include equity. I think those are two separate issues.
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree. I would, I don't know, there's part of me that's curious to see how lasting some of these efforts are. You know, it's kind of, it's not easy, but it almost becomes sort of like a standard for a company to issue some sort of statement about their own push for diversity and inclusion. And they may make some efforts in that regard. But a lot of that I feel is just in sort of like almost like a knee-jerk response to the protests that are going on right now. So I'd be curious to see sort of where companies settle 2 years down the line when nobody else is protesting and things have quieted down, sort of what those efforts are. And I'd also say that the sort of diversity and inclusion starts at the top of the organization. That it's you know, keep an eye on like the makeup of the board of directors as time goes on, the C-suite positions, like how those positions are being filled. You know, and time will tell to see, you know, exactly how successful all of this recent push has been in sort of making those areas more diverse. Because I mean, in my experience, sort of that's where you really find the lack of diversity in a lot of these companies. That you can look at sort of, you know, management level, supervisor, management, director level, and it looks fairly diverse. But when you start to get to, you know, the vice presidents, the presidents, and the people that are in the C-suite, then you know, the makeup of the room looks drastically different. And so I'm curious myself. I don't know how successful it's going to be, and part of it is on the employees to keep the pressure on to make sure it's front of mind. That you know, there needs to be a push within the organizations to hold your organizations accountable to some of the things that they're saying now, to make sure that they kind of follow through on the things that they say that they're going to do. So I'm not sure. I mean, like I said, we'll kind of revisit in a year or two to see how successful it was. But I just know that there's a lot more work that needs to be done in that regard.
I'm going to chime in here from a academic perspective, where I do think we see particularly women in economics hired into academe being hired more often into the non-tenure track instructor roles as opposed to the tenure track roles. And I think at first people weren't really acknowledging it, just to be honest with you. They were like, no, but we have more women in the field. And I have pointed out to people, but they're largely in these, because you cannot move, generally speaking, from an instructor non-tenured role into a tenure track role. It's just not often done. It's very hard. And so I think we're becoming more aware in the academic side of economics of that situation. But I think it's that it is a problem that we get diversity without necessarily getting equity at the same time.
No, that's great. So again, more questions can pull through in the Q&A. We'll address them as we go through. Now shifting gears back to virtual, I'm curious, how is everybody doing this right now? I know it's been a struggle for 3 months now, 4 months, almost going to 5 months now. But how is everybody dealing with the change? What are you doing in your day-to-day that's making this easier and possible? And how are you managing that Zoom fatigue, right? We're always on, we can always get on a call. We have nowhere to be. We all have devices. How are you all each managing that and making sure you balance?
The $100,000 question. So Brian, among others, mentioned it earlier about the blurring of work and life. The work-life balance has, it wasn't destroyed by COVID. It was blurred long ago. We've obliterated it with COVID, and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here. It really has. And we've replaced, on a lot of levels, the hour or hour and a half of commute time that even if you were close by to work, it took you a half hour to walk to your car and get to. That was decompression time on a lot of levels. And as I talk to people on my team and other colleagues, they tell me, not in the words of I miss my commute, but I miss the decompression time. And one colleague, she mentioned, it was kind of like a sort of not yoga, but meditation, that you're doing something mindless in the car for a half hour, and that you were kind of, all right, these are the things I need to work on tomorrow. These are the things I didn't get done, kind of decompressing from your day. We miss that. So that's something that's, I think, I know myself, but a lot of people are struggling with. That said, I did mention earlier that you have to be flexible. And that one of the things is, when your organization or your position or your boss, for that matter, and folks above you, request and demand X, Y, and Z, and I need X back by 8 in the morning, and they gave it to you at 10 o'clock at night, you got to work all night and do it. So there's a lot of short shrifting other responsibilities, certainly around the house, that aren't getting done because you're just trying to work through this work-life balance thing.
I started my career in management consulting, and management consultants are notorious for burning people out. And I had a mentor very early on that taught me the concept of a balance sheet. There are times in your career, there are times, in a year, in a week, or whatever, you're going to be borrowing, and there are other times that you should be saving up. And if you have that kind of attitude about every dimension of your life, with your significant other, with your children, if you have them, with your boss, whatever, you are more likely to attain balance over time. But there are going to be times when you're borrowing heavily, and there are times when you're spending heavily. And part of what I have been happy to surround myself, my team is filled with passionate people that are interested in what we do. And so the number one problem we were going to have as this crisis started was burning the candle 24/7, because there's so much data that we were trying to get, and there's so many questions we need to have answered. There's so many clients that wanted to talk to us. I spoke to 23 clients in one day back in March. And part of the things that we've tried to do is accomplish it is a couple of things. One, meetings by force on our team can only be 20 minutes or 45 minutes in length. So they don't default to 30 minutes, they don't default to an hour, to give us a little bit of time in between things, so that you do have time to decompress and breathe. Another thing that we've done is we've blocked off sections of certain days on our calendars, because one of the things that we've learned is that all the other people inside our company, if they see you're available, then they'll book your time. And so we've gone in and put blocks on time to ensure that we have time to think, that we have time to read. And for me, like personally, that includes reading the Wall Street Journal. Yes, I'm old school and I like to look at newspapers every day, but I think there are a lot of things that you have to be more conscious about, because as like Mike was explaining, back in the old structure, you got that decompression time while you're driving and you're turning on the radio, or while you're walking, or while you're riding the MARTA, or for me, I traveled about 50% of the time. So the lovely thing about an airplane is you don't have to be connected unless you deliberately want to be connected. And I've lost that completely. And, have we figured it out? No. But I feel like, especially when I think about these last 5 months, July and August are feeling a lot more even keel with my team. And we've encouraged people to take time off. We've made a couple of people take a few days off, please. You've got to, just recharge yourself, even if it's just you're hanging out at home and you're not turning on the computer. And so we're having to be more conscious about things like that. And I think because we're doing that and we're encouraging with everyone else, that's really helped us all, kind of get through this.
Now, as a follow-up question, I know we're almost we are at the 1 hour mark, but I do want to include a follow-up question to that. If your organization is not as conscious of that aspect, how do you approach your boss saying you're overrun, you're pulling all-nighters to get stuff turned in at 7 a.m., to hand to the client at 9 a.m.? How do you approach that? How would you recommend students entering a new workforce where it's basically required to be on call 24/7 to structure those boundaries in a way that still portrays that they're dependable and reliable?
Mike, that's a good one for you.
I'd say on a number of levels. It's always about being reasonable. And to Jonathan's point of the kind of balance sheet, that's a great analogy. There's sometimes when you have to put in the late hours and the time. It's just something that's required. Because we're not clock punchers in economics and finance on a lot of levels. And certainly, all of us are at senior level positions. So the constraints and the expectations and everything else kind of moves up as you move through the organization and you mature through the career path. But that said, again, it gets back to reasonable. So if you're feeling overwhelmed for any level, even if it's just to Brian's point earlier of biting off more than you can chew, and it wasn't as much the time commitment, it was the, wow, I'm feeling a little swamped by this or this task or that, this assignment. Talk with your manager, talk with your, colleagues that you work with, and try to formulate something. And like, maybe there's a different way to do it. Maybe there's another way to approach it. Or maybe it's not the right fit. And some people just, for whatever stage that they're in life, it's not the right fit for them. So that's a possibility too. And you have to be honest, not just with yourself. And Brian mentioned all of us, and he's got kids in the background and such. We all, many of us have kids and families and what have you. There's other commitments, and you have to honor them just as much as you have the work commitment. You can't overemphasize or overweight that one and to the detriment of everything else. So again, working through that balance is important.
Yeah, just kind of wanted to add that, as students starting out as analysts, yeah, you're just going to sort of have to eat it in a sense. The important thing, no, I mean, Mike's laughing, but it's true. I mean, it's, you are burdened with the responsibility of continually having to demonstrate yourself like it's day zero every single day of your life. That's good in a way, because it means that every day is new and you're always coming up to bat. But it can be frustrating, especially at times like we find ourselves where, we are, overwhelmed with work and responsibilities. And either you step up to the plate or you take the uniform off in some cases. And everybody has that reservation price, right? Like, how much does this job mean to you? How, what type of opportunities are you being faced? And that's just a calculus that we all do every day, basically. And that's why we are, in a sense, we self-select into our profession, because we've done that calculus over the past, 10 or 20 years, or however long our careers are. There isn't really sort of an easy answer to any of that. And like right now, like all of us are just overwhelmed with work. We're overwhelmed with responsibility. And in some cases it is a 24/7 thing, and it's to the detriment of our family life and our relationships with our kids in some cases. But those are just sort of the calculated sacrifices that we have to make. And as Jonathan mentioned, we just have to find that time later on in life to kind of make up for it. We got to reclaim some of that, we got to pay back some of that debt that we just took out. And, I kind of wonder how far in debt Jonathan is and Mike is right now. Cause drawing on those credit cards right now,
Yeah, I would say one point though, Brian, is that early, as you mentioned, early in the career, just out of school or just into the first or second job, was, one of the things that was very important to accelerate my career was, and I've heard it from a number of sources, and including now Theo Epstein has a book, and he stole my line basically, which is do things other people don't want to do. And as an analyst, there were things that, I was working in a more accounting finance position, my first job, and it was like, well, nobody wanted to analyze this big account, and I was like, well, I'll do it. And no one wanted to do it. I'll do it. Hey, could you stay a little extra and do it? I'll do it. And those things helped accelerate my career. So, talking out of both sides of our mouth as far as, the time commitment and the other things is also sometimes those are the things that help get you advanced as well.
It's just, I got to tell you. So I remember the first day of my internship in business school, I was on an origination desk at Robinson Humphrey, actually. And it was me and two other interns. And it was 9:30 at night, and we were all staring at each other, wondering who was going to get up from their desk to leave first. And I think we made it till about 11:45. So we've all agreed at midnight that we would all get up and leave we would swipe our cards all at the same time to get out of the floor. The desire to please somebody's whatever, right, motivated us to put the hours in and to show that we could, just absolutely punish ourselves with work for the 10 weeks we were there. And it's been said, it's worth repeating, to the extent that you are overwhelmed and it is affecting, let's say, your mental health or your physical health, you're just not happy. It's affecting your relationships. Reach out for help. Let your boss know. Say, hey, I'm in deep, and I don't see a way out of it. There are very rare situations where your manager will come back and say, we're all in it together. And maybe this is one of those times. And I think there were points during the crisis that we were all in that same boat. But at least make yourself known that you need the help, that you need that's what a manager is there for. You're not allowed to make decisions for yourself. That's what the manager's there to do. The manager's there to help regulate the work that's being fed to you. And some of it may require some life changes on your part, but at the very least, like, just to not feel like you're helpless and to not get burned out and to keep yourself in the game as long as possible. I mean, definitely, if you're experiencing those moments, absolutely reach out and just put up throw up the white flag and say, hey, I need a hand here.
Great. Since we are at the end of our allotted time, I do want to set apart some time specifically for the scholarship. So Mary, if you want to go ahead and talk to the students about all the opportunities that the scholarship offers, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, each year for 25 plus years, I think the Atlanta Economics Club has offered a scholarship to an Atlanta area economics student. You can be a graduate or an undergraduate. A lot of years we give one graduate and one undergraduate. It just depends on the application pool. But I really encourage all you guys to apply. It's basically usually $1,500 scholarship. You can use it for, the money goes to you. You just have to use it for educational purposes. And we will accept applications this fall. The application is on our website. I believe the deadline is October 31st this year. These are October 31st or November 1st. I can't remember which.
Yes, and it's available if somebody wanted to.
Yes.
Start putting the stuff in. You don't have to wait until October to do it.
That is correct. You can go ahead and start working on it and submit it if you're ready. And so I really strongly encourage all of the students out there to apply. You also get a free membership to the club, which isn't such a big deal this year since we're doing everything remotely, but you do become a part of the club. I got involved in the club as a graduate student and as a person who was a recipient of the scholarship. That helped me, support me during my education, and that's how I got involved with the club myself.
That's great. So the sooner the better, right?
Yes, I mean, go ahead and apply if you're interested. It's definitely better, although a lot of people wait till the end, and that's okay too. But do it before the deadline because we get going with the committee reviewing them. So, but again, you can find the application on our webpage.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary.
Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. And thanks, Mary. So I do want to remain respectful about the panelist time and the student time, but if you're able to stay a couple minutes, you do have some specific questions that you'd like the panelists, those who can stay. How do we feel about that? Do we encourage that? Can panelists stay for a bit longer if any more questions come in?
Sure, yeah. Actually, I was typing to Mr. JPB, just to sort of answer your question directly, what are the chances of landing a remote job in machine learning and artificial intelligence in this environment? I can't really speak to the chances directly. That's kind of, that's really more of an idiosyncratic kind of an issue. And I say that with direct experience. I was in the hunt not too long ago when I was in grad school like yourself. And, you're going to have to dig through a lot of dirt to find the diamond. That being said, COVID has only hastened what was a drive towards automation, in basically every aspect of life. And so, the whole consulting field in machine learning and artificial intelligence was already, very deep. And I have to believe it's only gotten deeper. I've got colleagues of mine that from graduate school that have done very well for themselves in that regard. And it's not just in financial services. I mean, it's all throughout corporate America. I mean, everybody wants to implement some aspect of machine learning or some sort of machine intelligence into their workflow, whether it's from billing or accounting or project management is one project that I have a colleague of mine on. The opportunities are now starting to come to real opportunities are starting to come to fruition in that regard. So, assuming that you've got the chops and you've got a couple projects under your belt, I would try to see if there's any sort of internship opportunities with companies that you like that are doing some remote work. Try to land some real world stuff if you don't already have it. I don't really know the whole story there, but to the degree that you can do that, that'll greatly improve your chances moving forward. But yeah, you should be in a pretty good place, I have to believe.